Let's talk all the big recruiting news at Syracuse. They have a new guard. They lost the center in the portal. It's all give and take, Steve.
Yes, it is. The portal giveth and the portal taketh away as we welcome in our good friend Mike McAllister.
We have the Lord of the Portal.
That's right. 24/7 Sports. Mike, always great to have you on. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I think I might add Lord of the Portal to my Twitter bio.
I like that.
That is your official title.
It just rolls off the tongue, right?
We were kind of hoping
I've ever had.
We were kind of hoping we'd have you down here live at the Taste of Syracuse, but we'll settle for the phone. You're probably hard at work today, yes?
Always.
Yes, always. A lot going on, both with basketball and football. We'll get into football and why it's a big weekend coming up here in a minute, but let's start with basketball, and let's start with the newest addition, Lucas Taylor. Tell us about him and what SU fans can expect.
I think the nice thing about him is that he brings versatility to what they can do with him. He primarily was a frontline scorer for Georgia State. And by that, I mean he was kind of the guy that they put the ball in his hands and say, go get us a bucket. So he has that in his skill set. When he was at Wake, his first 2 years there, even though he played kind of sparingly, they kind of used him as a 3-and-D type of a guy. And he does have a reputation of being a very strong shooter. Now, I know his percentage last year was around 35%, and people look at that and say, okay, well, that's kind of what a lot of players at Syracuse were. What's the difference? The difference is he wasn't taking a lot of high percentage shots. And a lot of the shots that some of the guys at Syracuse got last year, he would have shot in a much higher percentage, I think, than that, depending on what he had around him. So the fact that he had to probably take a lot more contested shots and difficult shots than what he would have to at Syracuse, I think is part of why that percentage is a little bit lower than maybe what you'd expect from a big-time shooter. But he can really shoot. And then I've talked to him briefly throughout the recruiting process, and he told me that he's got the skill set to play the one. He just has never been asked to do that. But he can run a team, he can run a fast break and do some of those things. So I think he's got some versatility to play the one or the two a little bit. I don't think he's going to be your primary point guard, but maybe as a reserve point guard. And given his size and his length, I think he's got the ability to play some three as well. So I think all of that is why Coach Autry was after him and why he thinks that he'll be a good addition to their roster.
You know, Mike, you mentioned the word versatility there, and given this day and age of transfer portal, do you have to recruit like that out of the portal now? Because, gone are the days, at least it seems like gone are the days where you bring in somebody and you kind of develop them for 2-3 years to the point where then they're ready to go out and play. Do you need to go out and get guys who can play multiple positions because it's so hard to have depth on a team?
Yeah, that is certainly one way to combat a lack of depth and combat the fact that you don't have a lot of roster continuity year to year, which is why I think, the NCAA kind of basically saying once the transfer portal became a thing and they lost, those combating that in court, that it basically was no, there's nothing we can do about this, so we're just going to let it be what it is. That kind of hurt a lot of teams and their ability to keep guys 2-3 years. You think about a guy like William Patterson, who you guys talked about, who's now going to High Point. In years past, maybe he waits until year 3 and then becomes a backup in year 4, becomes a starter, and that's his college career. I mean, there are a lot of guys at Syracuse that were that way. Sherman Douglas sat behind Pearl before he took over, and it's just a lot of examples of that. And that doesn't really happen anymore. A guy like Sherman Douglas would have transferred the year that he didn't beat out Pearl Washington as the starting point guard, right? So that's just the way that it is now, and I think grabbing guys that can play multiple positions helps you feel better about your depth year to year. But I think it needs to eventually at some point settle down to the point where having guys 2-3 years and develop behind the scenes and wait and be patient with their time, I hope that at some point it comes back in some way, shape, or form.
I think we recently asked you to take a stab at who the starting lineup is. I'm not going to ask you to do that today, but Paulie did bring up the point guard position. How do you think the minutes will be distributed, especially with Lucas Taylor now in the mix? You said he has the ability to handle the ball if need be. Do you have any idea how the minutes in your mind would be divvied up among these, among the options that Adrian Autry has right now?
I think it might depend on how healthy Chance Westry is, meaning if he is healthy, good to go, and plays the whole season next year, I think he's going to spend some time at the one. So do you have, Jaquan Carlos playing 25 minutes there, Westry playing 10, and then the other 5 is split between Lucas Taylor and J.J. Starling, depending upon matchups and things like that. I could see something like that happening. I could see Syracuse using Westry as a 2 or a 3 and just having the 1 split between Carlos, Starling, and Taylor in sort of a similar 25, 10, and 5. That's kind of how I see it playing out. I think Carlos is going to get a bulk of the minutes there and probably play 25 plus, but on most nights. But depending on your matchups and how things are, what team you're looking at and how players are playing, I think it gives Red a lot of options so that if on a certain night Carlos isn't playing very well, you can sit him down. You've got multiple options of guys that can come in and take over that spot. If you need, more isolation scoring because of the team you're playing against struggles with ISO players, you can take Carlos out because that's not really his game and put someone like a Westry or a Taylor in and say, go score for me. So I think it gives him a lot of options, and that's, I think what he's looking forward to the most with this roster is that he does have those options.
We were just discussing worst-case scenarios on injuries. What if Carlos gets hurt? Who do you think is the point guard at that point?
My guess is that they would probably slide JJ over and then bring someone in like a Westry or a Taylor to be the other starting guard. And you would kind of have something similar to what you had with Judah Mintz last year, which is, I know Judah Mintz was kind of the primary point guard, brought the ball up the court a lot, but you also saw Starling do that a little bit. So I think you kind of be by committee at that point, and they would sort of share responsibilities. But I think you'd bring in one of those other guys, and they kind of split time running the offense with JJ.
Does that worry you? Because we were also talking about that at the center position. Are they capable of somehow getting another guard or center?
Guard, I don't think so. There's too many of them there. And you've also got Kyle Cuff, and perhaps he can come in and help a little bit. I think he gets forgotten from time to time when you're talking about all the guards that they have. But center-wise, yes, I do think they're looking for someone else that can be a big and someone who's not just a pure center, but also can play a little power forward if you needed him to. So the only real name there's been any type of rumor about is a guy, I think his name is Max Adams, if I'm remembering that correctly, from Marist. He's about 6'8", 6'9", played center for them last year. And the reason there's rumors about Syracuse having interest in him is mainly because of social media activity. The fact that I think it's Coach Engelstad follows him on Instagram, and it was a relatively recent follow. I think that's really where the rumors came from. Oh, there must be some interest. There must be some contact. But there hasn't been any official reporting that there's been extensive conversations or they're working on a visit or there's been an offer or anything like that. But they're definitely looking to try to bring in another big to have a third center on the roster, just because you never know with injuries. You want to have as much depth as possible.